They draw you in with a strange magnetism, as if they see something in you that no one else ever did. At first, it feels intoxicating. Their attention, their charm, their certainty. It makes you feel seen, chosen, almost special. But soon, something shifts. The warmth turns cold, the admiration becomes criticism, and the person who once seemed to mirror your soul now reflects only your flaws. You begin to question yourself. Am I the problem? Why do I always feel drained after being with them? Why do I keep hoping they'll change? Carl Jung would say, "What you're seeing isn't love. It's a mask." Behind the charm lies a deep split in the psyche, a fracture between the true self and the image they project to the world. Jung called this image the persona, the role we play to be accepted. For the narcissist, that role becomes everything. This video will take you deep into the psychology of narcissism, not from the surface of behavior, but from the depth of the soul. You'll learn how to recognize a narcissist through their energy, their words, and the subtle patterns that reveal their inner emptiness. And more importantly, you'll see what Jung discovered about the wound that hides behind their perfection. Because to understand narcissism is not to judge it, but to see what happens when a person becomes trapped inside their own reflection. Carl Jung believed that every human psyche is born with a longing for wholeness, a deep inner drive to become who we truly are. But this journey, the process he called individuation, requires us to face both the light and the shadow within. For some, however, the ego becomes too fragile to begin that journey. When a person experiences early wounds, rejection, humiliation, lack of love, the ego builds walls of protection. And instead of growing around these wounds, it builds an identity on top of them. That identity becomes inflated, grand, idealized, untouchable. It's not confidence, it's defense. The narcissistic ego does not grow through self-knowledge. It survives through control and admiration. Jung saw this as a fixation of the ego, a kind of psychological possession, where the individual becomes enslaved by their own image. They need constant reflection from others to exist, like a mirror that keeps them alive. Without it, they feel invisible, meaningless, almost dead inside. That is why narcissists are drawn to empaths and sensitive souls. They sense the warmth, the openness, the capacity to reflect their image back with admiration and care. But instead of love, they seek energy, validation, a way to keep the mask intact. In Jungian terms, the narcissist is caught in the world of the persona, the social mask that we all wear to adapt to life. But for them, the persona becomes more real than the self. They have no bridge to the deeper layers of the psyche, no contact with the shadow, the unconscious, the vulnerable truth beneath. That's why their lives often revolve around roles: the perfect partner, the savior, the victim, the genius. Roles that keep them safe from what they fear most, the collapse of their image, and the encounter with their own emptiness. Jung warned that when the ego identifies too strongly with its ideal image, the unconscious begins to rebel. The shadow, everything that was denied, repressed, or disowned, starts to leak through. You'll see it in their sudden rage when criticized, their cruelty disguised as charm, their envy of others' light. They project their darkness onto the people closest to them, because to see it in themselves would shatter the fragile world they've built. Narcissism, in Jung's view, is not power. It is disconnection. Disconnection from the soul, from empathy, from the living center that gives life meaning. It is a tragic state. A person trapped within the mirror of their own creation, unable to see the world beyond their reflection. Every one of us wears a mask. Jung called it the persona, the face we show to the world, shaped by what we believe will earn us love, respect, or safety. But when the persona becomes too perfect, too polished, it starts to hide more than it reveals. It becomes a wall. And behind that wall lives everything the ego refuses to see: fear, shame, envy, weakness, longing. This is the shadow. For the narcissist, the mask and the shadow are locked in a war. They must keep the mask flawless, the charming, confident, admirable self, while pushing the shadow as far away as possible. And where does that shadow go? Into you. When you enter a relationship with a narcissist, you don't just meet a person. You meet their unconscious. You begin to carry the emotions they can't bear to feel. Their self-doubt becomes your insecurity. Their rage becomes your guilt. Their fear of being unlovable becomes your endless effort to prove your worth. It happens slowly, almost invisibly. You start explaining their behavior, justifying their moods, shrinking your light to keep the peace. They will accuse you of being selfish while they take and take. They will play the victim while causing harm. They will idealize you and then destroy you, only to feel powerful again. Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But in the case of the narcissist, what irritates them about you is precisely what they've buried in themselves. Your sensitivity exposes their numbness. Your authenticity reveals their mask. Your light awakens the shadow they refuse to meet. And so, they must control you, because you mirror back what they cannot face. This is the secret mechanism of projection, the unconscious act of seeing in others what we cannot accept in ourselves. It's why narcissists live in constant conflict with the world. Everyone becomes a mirror, and every mirror becomes a threat. Their relationships are not built on connection, but on reflection. They don't seek love. They seek affirmation that their image is real. And when the reflection no longer flatters them, they shatter the mirror. In Jungian psychology, this is not seen as evil, but as a profound tragedy of the soul. A life lived entirely on the surface, while the true self waits, forgotten, beneath the ruins of an ideal. If you want to recognize narcissism, don't start with the big gestures. Start with the pattern. Jung would say, look at the energy beneath the image, how it organizes your relationship around their persona, and how it banishes their shadow into you. 1. The mask arrives first. They lead with a role: rescuer, genius, victim, prodigy, saint. Early on, you feel chosen. They see you, but it's a spotlight, not a gaze. It illuminates you only as long as you reflect them. Notice how quickly intimacy is claimed. I've never felt this before. You're my person. We're the same. This isn't closeness. It's possession by image. 2. Love bombing, mirroring, data mining. They mirror your tastes, your wounds, your dreams. What seems like deep resonance is often information gathering. Later, the very details you shared are used to bind or break you. If you were really spiritual, you'd understand. After everything you told me, you still doubt me. 3. The persona must be fed. Admiration functions like oxygen. When praise slows, irritation rises. Conversations bend toward their accomplishments, their pain, their needs. Your joy is tolerated if it reflects well on them. Otherwise, it becomes a threat, and they subtly diminish it. 4. Words without weight. Apologies arrive as performances. I'm sorry you feel that way. No behavioral shift follows. Promises are abundant. Future faking, vacations, projects, reforms, just around the corner. The future is their currency. The present rarely changes. 5. Envy behind the eyes. Jung wrote that unowned shadow returns as envy. Watch for the micro winces when you succeed, the faint coolness after you share good news. Soon, you'll notice undercutting, backhanded compliments, practical doubts, sudden critiques framed as concern. Your light exposes their lack. The shadow fights back. 6. Boundaries equals betrayal. Healthy people can tolerate no. The narcissistic structure experiences your boundary as abandonment or insubordination. They escalate, re-argue settled topics, change the frame, bring in third parties, triangulation, or switch to silence. The goal isn't resolution, it's re-establishing control. 7. Gaslighting as reality management. You recall an event, they revise it. You share an emotion, they rebrand it as oversensitivity. You ask for clarity, they accuse you of interrogation. Gaslighting isn't always loud. Often it's a soft, constant fog that makes you doubt your sight. 8. The narcissistic injury. Critique the image, and you meet the shadow. Sudden rage, contempt, or ice. They may attack your competence, sanity, or morality. Whatever will silence you. Later, they may return as if nothing happened, expecting the slate to reset because the persona resumed command. 9. Public halo, private hell. In public, generous, funny, admirable. In private, irritable, withholding, dismissive. This split is archetypal. Persona for the crowd, shadow for the intimate other. If you keep making excuses, they're just stressed. Notice how your world shrinks to frame them as good. 10. Transactions disguised as love. Gifts with strings. Favors that must be repaid with loyalty. Moments of tenderness followed by a bill. Attention, access, compliance. Love becomes ledger. Warmth becomes leverage. 11. Cycles, not chapters. Idealize, devalue, discard, hoover. The cycle is the structure. The hoover isn't love returning. It's the persona reclaiming its mirror. They resurrect old language, old music, old places, not to heal, but to reset the image. 12. control of narrative, space, time. They're late. You wait. They cancel. You understand. Plans center on their rhythms. Your needs are logistical problems. Stories about you are told with a slant that preserves their virtue. You begin editing yourself to keep the peace. Evidence that the field of the relationship is no longer mutual. 13. Compassion without empathy. They can perform compassion, say the right words, send the right text, but empathy requires entering your world. With them, your pain often becomes an opening to talk about their pain. Your story becomes their stage. 14. Spiritual bypassing, therapeutic jargon. If they're conscious, watch for language as camouflage. Shadow work used against you. You're projecting. You're not in your feminine, masculine. If you were healed, this wouldn't trigger you. Jungian ideas are meant to liberate, not to dominate. 15. Energy aftertaste. When you leave, do you feel calm and nourished, or drained, jittery, ashamed? The body registers what the mind rationalizes. Jung trusted the felt sense. Your nervous system is an honest witness. 16. The missing middle. Extremes of adoration and contempt, but little ordinary tenderness. No slow, consistent repair. No humble curiosity in conflict. The middle ground, where real intimacy grows, feels empty or unsafe to them. 17. Humor with a knife. Jokes that cut your soft spots, then relax, can't you take a joke? Teasing that targets identity, past wounds or dreams. This is dominance testing, wrapped in charm. 18. Rules for thee, not for me. They expect grace, but give little. They demand transparency, but keep secrets. They cite principles when it benefits them. Otherwise, the rules are rigid or controlling. A Jungian caution. Narcissism exists on a spectrum. Not everyone who shows some of these signs has a disorder, but patterns over time reveal structure. Jung's lens helps us see the inner mechanics. An ego fused to persona, terrified of shadow, hungry for mirrors. When you recognize this, you stop bargaining with the mask and start listening to your soul. How recognition feels. Clarity returns. Breath deepens. You stop arguing with fog and start honoring your boundaries. Recognition is not condemnation, it's disentanglement. Not to punish them, but to stop abandoning yourself. In the next part, we'll go beneath the signs, into the wound that sustains this structure, the forgotten child within the mirror, and why empathy alone cannot heal what only inner work can transform. Beneath every mask lies a story. And beneath the narcissist's mask lies a story of loss. Carl Jung said, "Where love stops, power begins." When a child's need for love goes unanswered, when tenderness is replaced by control, neglect, or ridicule, the psyche must find another way to survive. Love becomes too dangerous, too uncertain. So the child turns to power. That power can take many forms: charm, intelligence, beauty, status. But beneath it all lives the same wound, the terror of being unseen. The narcissist's grandiosity is not confidence. It is a fortress built around shame. Jung saw this as a collapse of the bridge between ego and soul. Instead of growing into the wholeness of the self, the person becomes trapped in a false center, an inflated ego that pretends to be divine. They don't just want admiration, they need it, like air, to silence the emptiness that echoes inside. Behind the arrogance lies a child who once reached out and found nothing. No one mirrored their feelings. No one said, "You're enough." So they learned to build their own mirror, and then forced the world to reflect it. That's why narcissism is not truly about superiority. It's about defense. A desperate attempt to avoid humiliation, to hide the unbearable truth. I am empty. I am unworthy. I am afraid. But this truth never disappears. It lives in the unconscious, haunting them like a ghost. It surfaces through envy, control, addiction, obsession, through the endless hunt for admiration that never satisfies. Jung compared this state to a spiritual possession, a person ruled by an archetype rather than their soul. The archetype of the hero, the king, the goddess, the victim, all masks of power built to hide the helpless child. They speak in absolutes. I'm always right. They split the world into good and evil, loyal or enemy, adoring or worthless. Because ambiguity, that tender gray space where real intimacy grows, feels unbearable. If you've ever tried to love a narcissist, you've met that child, even if only for a moment. In the cracks of their anger, their eyes soften. In the silence after their rage, you feel a sadness they can't name. But then the mask returns, because love for them has always meant vulnerability, and vulnerability feels like death. This is why you cannot heal them with your empathy. You can touch their soul, but only they can walk toward it. Healing begins when the mask cracks from the inside, when they tire of performing and begin to face the emptiness they once feared. Until then, their relationships are mirrors, fragile and temporary, reflections of a self they never learned to love. So when you recognize narcissism, remember, you are not seeing power. You are seeing pain, disguised as control. You are seeing the shadow of a child who learned that love was conditional and never found a way home. In the end, narcissism is not a story of villains. It's a story of lost connection, a wound that grew into a mask. And while we cannot heal another's shadow, we can choose not to lose ourselves inside it. The moment you see the pattern, you begin to wake up. Awareness breaks the spell. You stop chasing the reflection and start remembering your own light, the part of you that was never meant to live inside someone else's story. Jung reminded us that what we withdraw from projection becomes ours again. When you stop reflecting the narcissist's image, you reclaim your soul. You return to your center, where love is not performance, but presence. If this video helped you understand the deeper psychology behind narcissism, remember to subscribe to Soul of the Mind for more explorations into the work of Carl Jung, the shadow, the self, and the ancient journey toward wholeness. Because the more we understand the darkness, the more light we bring into the world.